So you did this piece recently about the 27 people who, tragically died in the channel, and the reaction you got on Facebook wasn't what you were expecting, I guess. Can you tell us a bit more about the story and what you found?
Yeah, sure. So, like, briefly, it's obviously about the Channel Crossings tragedy, which happened last Wednesday. So we've been covering the Channel Crossings for, well, quite a number of years now, really. It's always a tough one to work out how best to cover it, because it's obviously well, at this point I think it's fair to say it's a humanitarian crisis that completely needs to be covered, and it's something that our readers need to know about. But I think it's balancing that with the now predictable backlash that we get, and that is represented in the comments. So that story went up last Wednesday. We covered it as obviously any big breaking story would be covered. It's important to say it's not the first tragedy that's happened in the channel, but obviously the previous ones have been on a far smaller scale. So this is by far the biggest, and obviously massively devastating. It's also important to say that the vast majority of our readers saw it that way as well. I think it's kind of something people saw coming for a while as well, because it's an incredibly dangerous route, and unfortunately there's not really been too much done in terms of establishing safer routes, which to my mind at least would kind of solve the issue and immediately crush the people trafficking gangs exploiting it. But I suppose that's a separate matter. But yeah, so it went up. The initial story went up last Wednesday, I think about 4 o'clock, and pretty much straight away it started getting quite a lot of traffic, quite a lot of engagement, and there was an undercurrent, as there has been before, of people who not just didn't care about it, but actually were sort of openly celebrating the fact that 27 men, women and children had drowned in the channel, which is obviously an appalling way to react to it. And the way they did so was just with the sort of laughing emoticon that you can react to stories with on Facebook. Facebook now allows you to close the comments if you want, which is something we've done in the past. But we did notice that when we were running these stories, more and more of them were getting these sort of laughing emoticons. And it's a real challenge between closing the comments because of some of the horrible comments that get posted there, but also we've kind of come to the conclusion that leaving them open and allowing people to then challenge the people laughing at it may actually be a better approach. And then obviously if any horrendous comments do get posted, we can then act on those separately, and ban the users if we need to, or just take the comments down.
So what were some of the things that they did you have the comments open, and if you did, what were some of the things?
On this one, based on what's happened in the past, yes, we had the comments open, which I still think was the right decision. But there was still quite a few people that reacted in that way with a laughing face. I think 96 people did that. Again, the vast majority reacted in the complete opposite way, but yeah, it's still 96 is a lot of people, really, especially on Facebook, where there's not really much anonymity. Obviously there were some fake profiles and stuff, but the majority just put their names to it as well.
So what were some of the things that they said, because you challenged some of them, right? And what was the response when you quizzed them?
Well, they kind of just they just doubled down. They were completely even when challenged. I mean, some of them just didn't respond, obviously. Some didn't want to talk to me at all. A couple said they'd done it by accident. But I think out of 10 people that got back, I think 9 of them just doubled down. Didn't seem to care. One guy said, "Well, it's not my family, so why would I care?" Just more. I mean, if anything, it made it worse in my opinion. Just putting a face up's obviously terrible, or reacting in that way is terrible, rather. But some of the views that they were expressing, even when kind of challenged on it, made it in some ways worse.
What kind of things were they saying, then?
Saying the stuff you hear all the time about people taking jobs, about the asylum seekers that come over all being criminals, rapists and murderers was repeatedly used. Some guy said that his daughter couldn't get a doctor's appointment and it was due to asylum seekers coming over. Stuff that's easily disprovable. Like, none of it's backed up in fact, and this is kind of why we chose to do it, to see how they'd react if you actually presented them with the facts that, yeah, kind of should stop their opinions dead, but actually they didn't react in that way. I think there's an element of mistrust there as well. So if a journalist goes to them and says, well, hang on, you're saying this, but none of the facts seem to back it up. There's certain people that have got to the point where even if you present them with facts which are, you know, accepted by the majority, that they still just won't accept it, and they're still very unwilling to budge from their original stance on the matter.
Was it like, oh, there's a kind of laughing emojis, let's dig and find if there is a kind of story? How did that kind of process start, I suppose? And did you have, was there a why behind why you did it? Did you want to, I guess, highlight that, you know, such kind of views are around, even though, as you correctly said, it's not the majority, that there are some people who have these views, though?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was, I mean, for ages, well, like I say, for years we've been covering the issue, and for ages we've been getting stick for the kind of comments that are posted and for the way that some of our readers choose to react to it. So I think we wanted to acknowledge that it's happening, but also, you know, our job as a publisher and a journalist's job isn't to tell people how to act, how to react to something. But it is to sort of give them the evidence, give them the information that's available, and say, you know, you might think this, but actually these are the facts, which, you know, take them or leave them, I guess, but you'd hope people would pay some attention to them. So I think we wanted to acknowledge the fact that it's going on, and the fact that these views do exist, but also, I mean, what I kind of predicted would be the case was the case, which was that even when presented with this information, people don't want to engage. They're kind of quite happy to think that way and not challenge themselves and not sort of reassess where they are. It's quite sad, really, in a way.
You touched on it a bit. Why do you think these views are out there? You kind of go into, like you said, a bit of data in terms of perception of immigration, and point out that actually compared to other countries, we don't take as many refugees. What's your view of why there's this level of hostility amongst some people?
I think it's such a complex issue now. I think there's various factors at play. I think it's touched on in the article, but one of them's political rhetoric around it, and that's both from the current government and more fringe groups. I think the thing about what one guy came back and said immediately, well, they shouldn't be passing through safe countries to get here, and that's a line that's peddled out by the Home Office again and again. And actually, I mean, I suppose the Home Office would come back and say, oh, we only ever say they shouldn't, as opposed to must not. But actually, it's not true. That there's no rule in place to stop asylum seekers doing that. And also, the definition of safe is obviously open for interpretation as well. You know, something that me and you might find safe isn't safe for someone who doesn't speak a language or whose family's in Britain or whatever other factor might be at play. So I think some of it's that. I think they hear these things all the time, and they hear them from sort of traditional authority, traditional sources of authority. I think there's also social media obviously plays a big part in it. You know, it's not regulated. People find people with similar opinions on there, and it acts like an echo chamber. We know about these algorithms and stuff which kind of push you towards similar, and that works both on the left of politics and the right of politics and everything in between. You kind of gravitate towards a similar group. I think that's a breeding ground for it. And also, I think, you know, the media has to take some responsibility as well. I think in the past, you know, Katie Hopkins wrote that column where she called refugees cockroaches, not even that long ago, really, which is crazy to think about. There's been various articles kind of, mentioning the numbers, which again, not backed up really in any facts, saying they're all going to come here and sponge off the state. So I don't think these individual people that I approach can be held fully responsible for holding those views. I think they've got there through a variety of misinformation and things like that. So it's a really tricky one to answer, like just how they've, and that's kind of what I was trying to get out of them. Like I did just point blank ask one guy, like, what's got you to this point? And he wasn't willing to really go into any more detail. He's just absolutely convinced that his view on, well, I think his particular view was they were all criminals. He was just completely unwilling to convince that might not be the case.
It's just a very complex area, isn't it? And like you say, there's many factors really, from, I suppose, dog whistle rhetoric from certain politicians through to, I guess, media, you know, trying to not necessarily sell a narrative, but, you know, kind of appeal to kind of controversy, which we know does well, right? Especially when it comes to clickbaity stuff. And these people seem to be almost a creature of the circumstances that exist, which is obviously really sad. And also, I guess, there's a lot of what I call kind of ones and zeros thinking at the moment, like everything's either this or that, and there's no room for nuance or gray areas, which is where, you know, some of the data that you throwed up is where the nuance and the gray areas are. You know, what is a safe route is, you know, but people don't want to engage in that. It's either yes or no. It's quite binary, I feel like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's become so binary and such a divisive issue that people aren't willing to enter that debate. And I think there is a debate to be had. You know, some people genuinely do think that their lives are made worse by the fact that other people are coming to this country from other countries, and it's sad that they think that way. But there needs to be a debate about it in order for people to think that they're, I don't know, everyone that I approach, and I think this is true of a section of society, they're immediately on the defence, thinking that, you know, my life's made worse by asylum seekers. And part of that, I think, is a problem in that we haven't had that open discussion about it. So they don't think there's a space for their view, which, I mean, now there isn't, because their views are so far gone in the other direction. Whereas I think if that conversation was slightly more open, maybe there's a way to pull them back.
No, definitely. I think sometimes people probably think that, you know, they can't even engage in that kind of debate for whatever reason, and that almost pushes them to the fringes. Whereas actually, if you surface those views up, maybe there's room for, like you say, pulling them back in, or even having that, even being open and transparent. The process of doing that helps, I feel like, with people's understanding. You know, you don't necessarily have to convince them that, but they will get to understand a bit more of the nuances, which will hopefully take the heat off a little bit. But actually, one of the you know, minus the outliers, actually the comforting thing is, you know, you said more people were horrified and outraged by the response, and that's what you found. And I guess, even though it's important to highlight that there are people out there with such kind of, I suppose, noxious and abhorrent views, it's also important to say that the overwhelming majority of people aren't like that, and you can't tarnish everyone, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, it was a concern of, I think, doing this article. I mean, the response has been amazingly positive, but there was always a concern that by drawing attention to these people and just by going to them, I was quite careful not really to get the contrary opinion, which, well, I present the data that's out there, so in a way that is the contrary view. But I think the fear from my point of view was people think, why are you giving these people any oxygen? And actually it will make people do, I mean, it is a depressing read. There's no getting away from that. But also I think what it shows is these people are a vocal minority, and actually they've got nothing to back up their views at all. They've got there through for whatever reason, they've got to that point in their lives, but actually there's nothing to back up what they're saying. So in the end, I think actually it probably showed that a lot more people are decent people, decent human beings, and the response has definitely shown that as well. It's been incredibly well received, which is obviously nice. But also, actually, on that point, going back to the comments thing, when the comments were turned off and you just get a series of laughing faces or whatever, and there's no room to have any kind of criticism in the comments below, I think that almost makes it seem worse than it is, if that makes any sense. Because you don't get the decent people saying, you guys can't be laughing at this, that's completely out of line. There's no space to do that. Whereas by leaving them open, that was the hope that there would be people that actually posted, what are you doing? Why are you laughing at this? It's not funny, which is what happened.